So thank you for joining the Workamajig webinar regarding project change requests. Okay, let me go ahead and start sharing my screen here. All right, so the idea of the project change request is that, again, I'm going to change either a spec or something in a project custom field so I can route that for approval. So again, it's not just I'm changing something on the spec or the parameters of the project. I'm actually seeking approval for that. We can set it up that it can be either required that that's the way changes are made in it, or we can just have it open. The other benefit that we get from this is we can actually see versioning. So again, on a spec sheet, if I make a change, I can now see the difference between version 1 and version 2. So how did it change when it happened? Okay. As I said, there's going to be a couple of ways that I'm going to see these changes. I'm going to go ahead and go to my project. I created one here earlier, and I had created a couple of spec sheets, right? One's called copy spec sheet, and I'll just show you that. It's again saying just, who's this for? What is the purpose? I also have a photography spec that has some information in it. Okay. I also have on the project, I have some custom fields. One set is on the financial side, and one is on the sales side. These are just custom fields. You guys can create these however you want. Okay. So the workflow would be is that I need, for some reason I'm having it ask for a change. That can either come from the client or internally, but who's ever going to do that basically can come to the project and say new project change request. Click on the plus here. It's going to say, well, what type of change request do you want? I just happen to set these up to be two different ones. So we'll go through both of these. We're going to say, okay, I have a change in the spec. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one and saying, what's the subject? Okay. And maybe, again, I'm just adding some information about what the spec is, right? Then it's going to say who's requested it. And I go ahead and say next. And it's going to provide me with the spec sheets, okay? So if I have something to change in the copy one, I can go ahead and hit the pencil icon. I'm going to say, oh yeah, I need to add in branding and general ad. And who is this for? And I may change this to just say, this plus 55, okay? And go ahead and save that. And you'll notice when I did make the change that it actually identifies that this one has been revised. Perhaps on the photography spec, I don't have anything to change on that, so I'll leave it alone. The other thing I can do is also add in a new spec sheet. So if I didn't have one in here to begin with, I can actually say, okay, well, I actually need a publication spec in here as well, and go ahead and just fill out the side, whatever this is. Okay, just showing you how I can add that in. And you'll notice that it identifies that as being new. Okay. Once I've set up my spec sheets the way what I want to change, I can go ahead and say next. Okay. At this time, if I need to attach anything, I'm able to do that. But otherwise, I can just go ahead and submit it. Now, the submission is going to send it to the specified person that you have in the system for that change request. Okay, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But here we go. Here's the approver of this. So they'll see this as a bell item. So when I click on the bell, they'll see there's a change request sitting here. I click on that and click on it again, and it's basically identifying what's going on. So there's updated spec sheets. So I'm coming to the copy, and it's going to say, here's what it's going to change to. Here's what it was supposed to. Here's what it once was. Okay, so the prior versus the current. And I can see there's a publication spec. I don't see any difference, so that's probably a brand new one. Okay. At this point in time, again, it's really just saying, is this okay or not, right? So again, I can approve this or reject it and just say resubmit it. That would go back to the original person, which would be, again, John Arbuckle, right, would get this back saying, okay, you need to make some changes, and then you could submit it again. Okay. The other thing I'm able to do also is if it came to me, I'm the person reviewing it, I can actually add more to the process. Okay, so if I need to actually route this to another person besides me, I can go ahead and set up another step or just add people to this location. But as is, I'm just going to go ahead and approve this. And once I approve it, I get some comments. And go ahead and save that. So once that's been approved, this has now become what the specs are in the project. So if I come back to my spec sheets, right, I come back to the copy, you'll notice that I'll see that this has been updated. I go ahead and click on it, and you see that I have version 1 and 2. What's being displayed is what it changed to. So now it says emphasis on 55, general add and whatnot. If I need to see the versioning, I can go ahead and click on this and see those various versions of what they were prior. Okay. Make sense? Okay. The other type of change request this. Okay. The other type of change request is working off of the custom fields of the project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one. That one's called, I've set it up to be project. And again, it's the same idea as, again, a little bit of information, go ahead and do the step. These are the custom fields that came across. So in this case, I had a financial one. What's the client order number? And maybe I need to add another one that belongs to this project. And again, maybe it's 46885, right? Maybe the coordinator is somebody different. Again, where do I get the lead origin? Again, these are fields that I've just created in the system, okay? So you guys, this is pretty flexible as to what you want this to be. But again, it's typically for the PM or account manager level, since most creatives would not really see this level. Okay, go ahead and say next. And again, it just allows you to kind of see, what you're going to do, and then do the attachments. And I can go ahead and hit submit again, and that's been submitted. So once again, right, here's my approver, and I come back into the approver, right? Change this out, recycle this. Okay, and here's that new change request sitting there. And again, just like before, open it up. It's going to say, okay, here's what needs to be changed. Is this okay? Right. Oh, sorry, so more or less. It's these ones right here. Again, I changed it from this to this. And if all looks good, again, go ahead and approve it. Again, just with some approval comments. Okay. Now, in this case, for the project level, so again, I'm done with that approval process. So now I'm back to the original one. These changes are going to be seen in the project settings. So, or actually, I'll see them here in the custom fields. Recycle this. And I have these custom fields, and you can see that the custom fields have updated now. Now, one thing that we don't have in here for these custom fields is that versioning. So the only way I would be able to see the versioning is if I came into the request, the change request itself, right? And clicked into it, and I would see that differences between that. So again, if it's the spec sheets, we'll version out the spec sheets, but when it's for the project custom fields, you'd have to go back to the request form, okay? Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So we can kind of stop there. So that was basically the workflow of how we see it. Is basically from the project, somebody says, hey, I need to make a change, and we have it pre-routed. Is there any questions for that? Okay. Doesn't look to be, so let's go with the setup. So now, again, I saw how to use it. So how do we set this up? So if I come into, again, menu, admin manager, system setup, we're going to have a couple of things. So first off is the security settings. And that would just be that we have change requests, right? So we have, here we go, the section on change requests. And this is basically saying, can I use them and how can I use them? That makes sense? Okay. This is, do I have access to actually edit the change request back in system setup? This part that's under change request is more for the full user. Again, am I able to create new ones and edit those? Okay. There's also a setting on the client side as well. Can we use those change requests? Okay. So that's the security rights. As far as the setup, again, I go to tracking and we'll see define project change requests. Okay. And within here, I'll just go ahead and open the ones that I've already pre-created. So here's one. Again, I create a new one. It's going to allow me to basically name it. Okay. So if I pencil icon, what's it allowing me to do is say copy, copy changes and specs. We can actually have customized email subjects. So using, whatever you put in here, and then if you want the request ID, just make sure you add this into here. So if I copy this out, I say, and then I add that, then the subject line would be sent for approval type stuff with the ID after that. So you can basically embed this anywhere that you'd like. You want to say send, right? If you want to do it something like that. Okay. So that's the customized subjects. Okay. Trim that out. If it's blank, these are the defaults that show up. Okay. Basically, we have a couple of other settings. Again, do we send a confirmation email to the requester? Do we use the default name and email address? Do I need to notify project team once it's approved? So that means anybody that's on the project team will get that, hey, there's been a change. Okay. The other thing I'm doing is the access. So who's going to be able to access this to create a new project change? And so again, based upon security groups, I've already done all of them. So this is all the security groups in my system that are allowed to basically request a change. Okay. The approval process, a little bit different here. So we do set up the approval process saying just, click plus and say, what is the name of this step? It's usually approval. We would set up who are the approvers and who are the notified. The nice thing is that, go ahead and click on this one. Okay. Here. Okay. So you see that we have as an approver, it just says copywriter. So actually when we add approvers here, we have the concept of key people. So in this key people, this would be the typical account manager set on the project, primary contact set on the project, billing and project manager. These are all project level settings. Then I see these other ones called designer, copywriter, and programmer. And that's actually a transaction preference. And I can show you where that is in just a sec. But we have a field called key people. So on the project, I can define who's my copywriter, who's my designer. And these labels are set up by you. Then it's just a name list in the project. Okay. So that's the way that we can set it up. And, anytime I make a change request, it goes to the account manager, right? Or the project manager. In my case, I set up to go to the copywriter. Okay? And we can do the same thing for the notify as well. We can set it up that same way. Of course, I can set it up to also to use services. So, notify all the photographers or all the, editing people. So if they've been assigned to editing on the project, they would get that change request. Okay. We can also set it up to be, of course, usually towards the staff, right? Whoever my people are, I can have them notified. Okay. So a little more flexible than maybe a project request form, because again, this is specifically for a one project. So we're able to basically say, take these fields. Okay. Now, as far as this, again, I won't get into how I create the spec sheets or the custom fields, but those fields are basically coming in from custom fields, project custom fields. And so these are the project custom fields. So whatever's there, that's what will be available. As far as the tracking and spec sheets, again, as I develop out my spec sheets, and I believe we have some webinars on that or some information in the help guide, how do I create my spec sheets? But that's where those items are both coming from. Okay. Then the last bit, again, I said in transaction preference, so I'm in account information, transaction preference. And from, let's see, where was that? Under projects, you're going to see here labels for key people. And that's why I said designer, copywriter, and programmer. Okay. And where that feeds to is if I go to the project and go to the project settings, we'll see this section called key people. And so since I only set up 3, that's what I have. And so again, I can basically select who is going to be my designer for this particular project. And then that can feed into different reporting. And like I said, for the change request, that can be maybe part of the approval process as well. And that really, I say this in a nutshell, that is project change requests. Are there any questions regarding either workflow or setup? Okay. The question is, can you explain the difference between this and a deliverable? Okay. The deliverable is more, I'm going to send you a file. Generally, I have, the finished product. Here's the website. Here's a JPEG or a PDF of what we're creating to be delivered to the client. Can you review this? And then that could drive more revision rounds. The change request is more like, like I did in mine. I went from just being a general audience to maybe I need to emphasize more 55. Again, this was a copy one, but if you had a photography one, perhaps it's, I said beach and coastal cliffs, but maybe there's been a change. We don't want beach photos. We want, city photos. So these would be the types of things that I want, provide to my, my team this information so they can see those changes and also make that comparison between the two. Should a change request be submitted for something like an estimate? That it can be used for that. Is that a change in spec? Do I pick up a spec that says change the budget? Do I have a custom field that does that? Okay. So yes, it could be used. I need to up the budget or something like that. Okay. Remember, these can also be filled out by a client. The client can come in, if you've given them the client portal, they can ask that same thing, right? Hey, I need this, more stuff, right? And that may drive something like a change in budget or a new project if that needs to be the case. Okay, so the question comes in, can anyone speak to how they use this feature versus deliverables? Again, if somebody wants to chat about that, you're welcome to. Unfortunately, nobody can talk, right? So we don't put that available. Okay. Another question is, how does the change request translate into a change order? And again, that it doesn't specifically say where I can, I can convert it and that makes an estimate. It would just simply be, again, whatever I'm tracking, whatever questions I'm tracking, either via the custom fields or via a spec sheet. If one of those questions was, does it need a budget change? And you select yes, right? Then again, that would drive the project manager to probably go to the budget and start speccing it out. Okay, so right now somebody is using specs and then they, as a part of a change request, they basically put it into the daily feed or they put in a conversation note or something like that to say, hey, can you make these changes? So yes, this would replace that workflow where you can say, hey, I want these changes. It goes to whoever to say yes. And it's then updated. And as you saw, obviously it versions it out. So anybody who comes to this, again, the working version is what's being displayed, but I can always see the different versions that came prior. Okay. And there are some people that actually that is the way it changes. So again, you can require this to happen. So the only way I can change a spec is if you actually put in a change request form. Sorry, that was on transaction preferences and projects, I believe. And we have it right here, project changes, sorry. Require change request to make spec sheet changes. Okay. This is basically the version. Every time I create a new spec sheet, I get a new version. Okay. That's what gave me that versioning. If I didn't have that selected, it would just go. Once I require the change request, versioning is automatically turned on. Now, for the person who's actually asked for, the change request drives a change order or change in the project estimate. Again, provide that feedback. If you're using it and saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice to do that? Give us that feedback. This is a relatively new, function in the system. Probably, 8 months, maybe a year or more. But again, relatively new for me. And so again, it would any feedback that you guys have to basically enhance this functionality is always welcome. Okay. Any other questions? Going once, twice. Okay. If not, I know this was a relatively short one. Again, there's not a lot to cover, right? It's basically just, kind of set up and the use of it. If you do have any questions, obviously send a note to support@workamajig.com and your account manager would be happy to go over the setup and any other questions that you may have. Thank you guys very much for attending. And you should get an email regarding this if you registered in advance. Otherwise, again, it'll be in our support guide, support@workamajig.com. And there's a link for webinars and videos. So it'll just be one of the past webinars. Okay. All right. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.